You can transcend YouTube into the YouTube multiverse. All right.
That's not what Nate is doing here at all. That's just one reason that people do this. Remember, my training is with the FBI and with the Bank Robbery Division of financial institutions for many, many years. This video is in direct response to a bunch of requests I've had for several months because one of my very first videos on this channel was about Nate Black. Stick around at the end. There is a very, very short quiz where you put the answer in the comment section about what draws you to Nate's particular YouTube education channel. And let's go.
There we're going. I am going to attempt to do this in a single take. No matter how many takes it takes to take this take, I'm going to attempt to do this in a single take because I wanted it to be as raw as humanly possible.
The reason why I just ran that clip is this. You do not ever want to take someone who is accustomed to being on camera and then try to do some sort of a body language breakdown on what is either scripted or even just very intentional for the camera. And I'm using this particular clip because he is very off the cuff, very transparent, very honest, and you can read him very easily. All right, first let's look at a Nate map. Now this is using what is known as a standard NLP map. That's neuro-linguistic programming map. Again, I have to show you the bell curve. This is where most people fall into this category. On the ends of the bell curve, there are people that do not fit into this category, but this map is what most people fall into. Some people are completely different. Nate is very, very similar to this standard map.
I am so excited to make this video. I also have a fair bit of trepidation based on the response and the reactions I've been seeing, and I realized I just really wanted to make this video to set things to light, to be transparent, and also point out why things are actually really awesome.
Okay, several things here. You'll notice that his illustrators, that's where your hand motions sort of match up to the syllables. These are what we call transparent and open, and they're right on point with his syllables. And on top of that, his eyebrows go up. This is when you unconsciously try to draw attention to yourself. You don't do this if you're lying. Generally, if you're making things up, you drop your brow or you look away and you try to not have eye contact. Not in every case, because some people look right at you if they're lying to you, but I'm talking about generally here. Now with Nate, notice that he threw his hands up to be transparent and his eyebrows went up because he's inviting you in to see that what he is saying, the way that he remembers it and the way that he's telling you is open and honest and transparent.
To set things to light, to be transparent, and also point out why things are actually really awesome.
Now notice as soon as he says to be transparent with his hands and his eyes are up and he's inviting you in, he immediately, where do his eyes go?
To light, to be transparent.
His eyes go down and to the right. This is because what he's about to tell you is deep in the feeling center. It's because he's feeling it. Now this next clip, pay special attention to when Nate says the first question, why'd you leave Channel Makers? He's going to swallow and he's going to look down and to the right because he's immediately accessing feelings. Pay attention.
The first big question is, Nate, why did you leave Channel Makers? I think the simplest way to answer this.
Notice that his eyes, after he swallowed and he looked down to the right and he engaged the camera, he's being as honest as possible, but now he's going to construct a visual in his mind. So his eyes go up and to the right.
I think the simplest way to answer this is to say that I was ready.
And then after his eyes go up and to the right, notice they go back and forth, to the left and to the right. What this is indicative of with most people is they immediately go to, okay, I've got to create a picture here that makes sense for everybody. And then when they go back and forth, you're shooting back and forth in this particular issue to things that you've seen before, and then how to then put them into a picture that you will understand.
It was time for me to move on for a few different reasons. So if you've watched the video on Channel Makers, you'll know about this.
Notice how many times he stops and he swallows and he looks down. Down is always internal. It's either he's thinking things about what he's going to say, he's swallowing because your mouth gets dry when you get just a little bit nervous. It doesn't mean you're being dishonest in the least. It means oftentimes you're being very honest, and when we're brutally honest, we lay our souls bare and we are being vulnerable. When we get vulnerable, our mouth gets dry. Oftentimes You swallow to produce saliva. Now watch his eyes as he says, I was hired to build this for the Income School company. His eyes immediately go down and to the right. And you should know what that means by now. What does it mean? If you were paying attention, you should know.
But I was hired as to build the YouTube presence for the Income School company. And I was so grateful for that opportunity.
The next clip is super important. He's going to start by downward right, and then he's going to come up to you. He's going to look directly into the camera, and he's going to admit that he knew he had no ownership. And watch where his eyes go when he says that.
And I knew going into it that I didn't have any ownership with it.
So he says, I knew going into it, and then he looks to his left. He's remembering something someone told him. And then he tells you, I knew going into it, I'd have no ownership, or I had no ownership in it. Now, if you're paying attention, what does that mean? When he looks to the left, he's remembering something auditory. This tells me, and it's been proved out now that we're several months into this, this tells me that this was something that not only he knew, but it's something that he was actually probably reminded of right before he left to start his own channel, that he didn't have ownership. That's why he looked to the left, which is your remembering auditory, remembering something you were told.
But of course, over time, putting so much time and effort into building something, I loved it.
This part is so good. I want you to watch this again. It starts out inner voice, and then he comes and he looks straight at you and he admits, I loved it. So maybe he was hired to do a job, but he fell in love with the very people. He fell in love with helping you and me.
But of course, over time, putting so much time and effort into building something, I loved it. And I cared a lot about the audience there. To clarify again, another thing that was in the other video, there was a concern that maybe it was...
Where do his eyes go here? Up and left. He's remembering something visual. He's remembering seeing something. Now watch what happens next. It's really, really interesting.
And of course, as I put so much effort into doing something like that, I start to feel like, well, this is really awesome. I would love to have ownership in something. That started becoming more and more important to me.
I really like when he said this part about over time, he realized that he would love to have ownership in something like this. And his eyes, they go left and they go right. These are things that he's heard. In other words, he's remembering conversations, discussions, meetings that he's had where his idea of opening up his own business, of running his own company, has been talked about. He's remembering. That's to the left, auditory. He's remembering discussions, conversations that he's had about this with people. And he's constructing and putting things together, multiple conversations, and kind of making them into one. That's why his eyes go left and to right when it comes to auditory.
Next question, why was the transition so sudden? Well, of course, there was more going on behind the scenes, that some of it personal, some of it whatever, that can be addressed maybe another time, maybe never.
This is interesting. He asks a question, and where do his eyes go? Are you paying attention? They go left, and then they go up.
Next question, why was the transition so sudden? Well, there were...
And he freezes for just a minute. So he's remembering things he's heard and things that he's seen. Clearly there were probably meetings, there were probably emails, there were probably texts that went back and forth. There may have even been whiteboard diagrams that were drawn. Who knows? He is obviously putting together sounds, but mostly visuals that remind him of this discussion.
Of course, there was more going on behind the scenes.
The other part that happens is after he looks up and he kind of moves around like this, he closes his eyes, and then he says there's a lot more going on behind the scenes.
Of course, there was more going on behind the scenes.
Why do we close our eyes? This one is not him, but this one I'll tell you. People close their eyes if they want to escape. This is someone who is sitting like in a courtroom and a judge hands down a horrible sentence, and right before the sentence comes down, or right during, or even right after, you watch the person being sentenced and they'll go, and what it is is they're trying to escape. They know they can't physically go anywhere, so the best thing they can do to remove themselves from the situation is close their eyes and go anywhere else in their head, but not there. That's not what Nate is doing here at all. That's just one reason that people do this. Remember, my training is with the FBI and with the bank robbery division of financial institutions for many, many years. So what Nate does is he does the second option when we close our eyes, and there are about 3 or 4. But the second one is this. We sometimes close our eyes when we have a whole bunch of information swirling around. Sometimes it's internal, sometimes it's audio, sometimes it's visual. But then when we finally gather the picture that we want to tell somebody, we kind of do one of these and then we shut our eyes. What it does is it buys us time. And we only need a split second for your brain to put all the pieces into the right order to present them to somebody.
Next question. What is next? What is next for Nate?
Notice here, he returns to the joyful, happy person that many of us are aware of. His voice completely moves from down here in the register of explaining to what's next.
What is next for Nate?
What's next for Nate? His voice goes way up. What does that tell us? Telling us that he's got some joy back in his voice. He's got some things going on in his head where he's in a happy place now. He's thinking about moving forward. He's no longer slogging through the oatmeal and quicksand that we just came through. No, now he's talking about the future. And of course he's happy. Look at the difference in his countenance. So now we're at the end. This is a quiz just for those who held on long enough to take part in this. I'm going to ask you a question. Watch this next very short video clip. You're going to see 2 things, and then I'm going to ask you the question.
You can transcend YouTube into the YouTube multiverse. All right, next thing you don't need, and I'm talking to you. Yes, you watching this.
All right, the 2 things here where you saw the 2 sides of Nate that seem to draw everybody. There's the playful, fun, articulate guy that creates those relationships with us.
You can transcend YouTube into the YouTube multiverse.
And then you got the real serious guy that gives legitimate educational YouTube advice.
All right, next thing you don't need, and I'm talking to you. Yes, you watching this.
So what is it that brings you here? That's the question. Put the answer in the comment section. What is it that brings you to Nate's channel as opposed to the one he used to work for or another one? Which one is it? Put it in the comment section below. I'm really interested in finding out. And if you've made it this long, do me a favor, click on one of these other videos over here. Lots of body language and psychology on this channel. Check it out, and we will see you guys in the next video.